In this story, a nurse's worst nightmare becomes a desperate fight for survival when she uncovers a sinister conspiracy at a renowned hospital. Babies are being sold to politicians for ritual sacrifices. But the horror doesn't end there. Miriam, a ghostly mother who lost her child to the ritual, begins haunting the nurse, demanding the return of her baby. As the supernatural forces grow stronger and the deadly syndicate hunts her down, Adeobi must make impossible choices, risk everything to expose the truth or fall prey to a powerful, ruthless conspiracy. This electrifying story is a relentless journey of love, vengeance, and the fight for justice, where the line between the living and the dead is more fragile than ever. Late at night in St. Azariah Hospital, Nurse Adeobi felt a chill run down her spine. She was on the night shift, attending to her routine tasks, when she heard a faint whisper, "Give me my baby." Adeobi froze, her pen hovering over the patient chart. She looked around, but the corridor was empty. Shaking off the unease, she attributed it to her exhaustion. Yet, the whisper lingered in her ears, and the air felt heavier with every passing second. She had only been working at St. Azariah for 6 months. The pay was good, but there were always rumors among the staff, whispers about things disappearing and shadows lingering where they shouldn't. That night, the eerie sound followed her wherever she went, growing louder when she walked past the maternity ward. The room seemed unnaturally cold as she adjusted a blanket over a newborn. As Adeobi left the ward, the lights flickered, and she saw a faint silhouette of a woman in a hospital gown at the end of the hallway. The figure stood still, staring directly at her. Before she could react, it vanished into the shadows, leaving Adeobi trembling. The next morning, Adeobi confronted Nurse Clara, her friend and confidant, about the unsettling events. Clara laughed it off at first but grew serious when Adeobi mentioned the maternity ward. "You don't want to know what happens there," Clara warned. "Some things are better left alone." But Adeobi's curiosity had been piqued. Later that evening, Adeobi sneaked into the records room. The hospital's reputation for handling special cases had always seemed strange to her. After rummaging through a stack of old files, she came across a folder marked "Confidential." It detailed the births and transfers of several infants, but something was off. Most of the newborns listed were marked as deceased within days, yet there were no death certificates attached. Just as she was piecing the clues together, Adeobi felt the room grow cold. She turned to see the silhouette again, this time closer. The whisper came, louder and more urgent, "Give me my baby." Adeobi dropped the file and bolted, her heart pounding. Determined to uncover the truth, Adeobi dug deeper into the records. One name stood out, Miriam Okafor, a patient who had died during childbirth 6 months ago. Her file showed that her baby was stillborn, yet Adeobi found no burial records or proper documentation. The eerie realization struck her, was Miriam the ghost haunting her? Adeobi began to investigate Miriam's life. She discovered that Miriam had been a single mother, desperate for a safe delivery. Miriam had come to St. Azariah after being rejected by other hospitals due to her lack of funds. The hospital had promised her special care, but it seemed their intentions were far from noble. Later that night, Adeobi encountered Miriam's ghost again. This time, the spirit seemed more vivid, her hollow eyes filled with rage and despair. "They took my baby," she wailed, her voice echoing through the corridor. Adeobi trembled as she realized she was now entangled in a web of deceit far darker than she had imagined. Adeobi confided in Dr. Eek, a young and idealistic doctor she trusted. He listened intently as she recounted her experiences, his face growing grim. "Adeobi, this hospital isn't what it seems," he admitted. "I've seen things that don't add up, babies disappearing, mothers dying under suspicious circumstances. But no one dares to speak up. Dr. Ick revealed that a powerful syndicate operated within the hospital, selling newborns to wealthy clients and politicians. These men sought fame, power, and longevity through occult rituals, and the syndicate supplied them with what they needed. It's dangerous to dig too deep, he warned. People who ask questions don't last long here. Adeobi felt torn. She wanted to help Miriam find peace but feared for her life. As she left Dr. Ick's office, she felt Miriam's presence again. The ghost's voice was firmer this time, a plea and a command, "Help me. Find my baby." The days that followed were filled with dread. Adeobi couldn't escape the whispers or the cold presence of Miriam. At night, the ghost lingered near her bed, her spectral form growing clearer. Miriam was no longer just a shadow, her torn hospital gown and tear-streaked face spoke of unbearable anguish. Adeobi tried to ignore her, but guilt weighed heavily. Dr. Ick's warning echoed in her mind. If she continued digging, she risked becoming another casualty of Saint Azariah's dark secrets. But how could she live with herself knowing that innocent lives were being stolen? Miriam's ghost grew restless, appearing at odd times. "Time is running out," she said one night. "If you don't help me, they'll do it again." The words cut through Adeobi's resolve. The choice was clear, she had to act. Adeobi decided to revisit the records room, this time armed with her phone to document evidence. She sifted through files for hours until she stumbled upon a ledger tucked behind a false panel in the cabinet. The book contained names, dates, and payments, proof of the baby trafficking ring. One name sent shivers down her spine, Chief Obinna, a prominent politician rumored to practice dark rituals. The ledger detailed multiple transactions linked to him, including Miriam's child. It seemed the hospital had sold the baby to Chief Obinna days after Miriam's death. As Adeobi processed the horrific truth, she felt a cold hand on her shoulder. Turning, she saw Miriam staring at the ledger. Her voice cracked with sorrow. "That's him," she whispered. "He has my baby." The next day, Adeobi shared her findings with Dr. Ick. She placed the ledger on his desk, her hands trembling as she opened it. "This is it," she whispered, her voice thick with fear and anger. Dr. Ick's eyes widened as he scanned the pages. Each name, payment, and transaction was a chilling confirmation of the hospital's dark dealings. "This goes higher than I imagined," he muttered. "The politicians, the businessmen, they're all involved." He pointed at a name Adeobi had overlooked, Chief Obinna, one of the most powerful men in the region, infamous for his rumored occult practices. Miriam's child was listed under his transactions. Dr. Ick looked up at Adeobi, his expression grave. "If we act on this, we'll be putting targets on our backs. These people don't forgive, and they don't forget." Adeobi swallowed hard. She could feel Miriam's presence growing stronger, as though the ghost were urging her forward. "I can turn back now," she said firmly. "If we stay silent, more babies will be taken. More mothers will suffer like Miriam." Dr. Ick nodded reluctantly, knowing they had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. That evening, Adeobi returned to her shift, her nerves frayed. The hospital seemed different, as though it were alive and watching her. The hallways were eerily quiet, and every creak and shadow made her jump. She noticed staff members whispering and exchanging glances when she walked by, their eyes filled with suspicion. As she made her rounds, Adeobi found a folded note slipped under her locker. The message was short and chilling, "You're in too deep. Walk away while you can." Her hands shook as she read it, but she quickly tucked the note into her pocket. She couldn't afford to let fear paralyze her now. Later that night, while checking on a patient, Adeobi felt a sudden chill. She turned to find Miriam's ghost standing in the corner, her eyes filled with urgency. "They know what you've done," the ghost whispered. They'll try to stop you. The lights flickered, and the ghost vanished, leaving Adeobi alone and terrified. Desperate for help, Adeobi agreed to meet Nkechi, the journalist Dr. Ik trusted. The meeting took place in a secluded cafe far from the hospital. Adeobi handed over the ledger, her voice shaking as she explained its contents. "This is proof," she said. "Proof that they are selling babies and killing mothers." Nkechi flipped through the pages, her expression hardening with every line. "This is explosive," she said. "But we can't just release it. If we go public without a plan, they'll come after all of us, and they'll bury this evidence." She suggested working with human rights organizations and building a case strong enough to ensure the syndicate couldn't escape justice. Adeobi nodded, but she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. As they left the cafe, she saw a dark car parked across the street. Its tinted windows gave nothing away, but Adeobi's instincts screamed that they were being followed. The syndicate's response was swift. That night, Adeobi returned to her apartment to find the door ajar. Inside, her belongings were scattered, drawers overturned, and her laptop smashed. Panic set in as she realized the ledger was missing. She searched frantically, only to remember she had left it with Nkechi. The next day, Dr. Ik received an anonymous message on his phone: "We know who you are. Back off, or you'll regret it." The hospital itself seemed to tighten its grip. Staff avoided Adeobi, and her supervisor began assigning her to grueling shifts, clearly an attempt to break her resolve. Miriam's ghost appeared again, more vivid and human than before. Her voice trembled with desperation. "They're getting closer," she warned. "If you stop now, they'll win. Don't let them take another child." Adeobi nodded, her fear giving way to determination. Nkechi's investigation led her to a critical revelation: Chief Obina's estate was hosting an elaborate ceremony in 3 days. Her sources revealed the gathering was no ordinary political or social event, it was a ritual tied to the syndicate's horrific operations. The rumors were chilling: the lives of infants were offered to secure wealth, power, and protection for its participants. Miriam's baby, Nkechi suspected, was still alive and slated to be part of the sacrificial ceremony. Adeobi's blood ran cold as she processed this. "He's using the baby for a ritual?" she asked, her voice trembling with both fear and fury. Nkechi nodded gravely. "The people involved in this don't care about morality. To them, power is everything, and they'll do anything to get it. The baby is a means to an end." Adeobi's heart ached for Miriam, whose anguished cries haunted her every waking moment. She knew she couldn't stand by. "We have to stop this," she said firmly. "We need to expose them before the ceremony takes place." But Nkechi hesitated. "If we are caught, they'll kill us. This isn't just a fight for truth, it's a fight for survival." Adeobi nodded, the weight of the task settling heavily on her shoulders. The trio, Adeobi, Dr. Ik, and Nkechi, sat in Nkechi's cramped office, formulating their plan. "The goal is to get solid evidence of the ritual," Nkechi explained. "Once we have visual proof, we can leak it to trusted media outlets and human rights groups. The public outrage will force the authorities to act." Adeobi volunteered to infiltrate the estate, her resolve unwavering. "I know the risks," she said. "But I'm the one Miriam keeps appearing to. I can turn my back on her now." Nkechi looked at her with a mix of admiration and worry. "You're brave," she said. "But bravery alone won't protect you. If they catch you, it's over." To prepare, Nkechi provided Adeobi with a small camera disguised as a button on her uniform. Dr. Ik arranged for a trusted informant to help Adeobi gain entry to the estate under the guise of a temporary cleaner. They rehearsed the plan over and over, ironing out every detail. As the night of the ritual approached, the tension among them was palpable. The night of the ritual was suffused with an eerie stillness. Adeobi arrived at the estate wearing a plain cleaner's uniform, her heart pounding as she approached the towering gates. The mansion loomed ahead, bathed in golden light, its grandeur masking the darkness within. The guards at the entrance scrutinized her but waved her through after a brief exchange with the informant. Inside, the air was thick with incense, and the murmur of low voices echoed through the grand hall. Adeobi moved carefully, her eyes darting around as she memorized the layout. Wealthy men and women mulled about in expensive attire, their faces calm and composed, betraying no hint of the sinister ceremony that was about to unfold. Adeobi slipped into a corner, pretending to clean as she discreetly activated the hidden camera. She placed it strategically near the altar, where the ritual was set to take place. The centerpiece of the room was chilling, a large, intricately carved table covered with black cloth, adorned with strange symbols. She forced herself to focus, knowing she couldn't afford a mistake. As Adeobi worked, she overheard snippets of conversation that made her stomach churn. "The blood of the innocent," one man said with a smirk, "is the key to immortality." Another responded, "Chief Obina's investments in this hospital operation have been worth every naira." Her hands clenched into fists as rage bubbled inside her. These people spoke of human lives as commodities, their words devoid of empathy or remorse. Her anger was interrupted by the sight of a small bundle being carried into the room by a servant. Adeobi's breath caught in her throat. It was a baby. The child's cries pierced the air, and Adeobi felt tears sting her eyes. Could this be Miriam's baby? She wanted to rush forward, to grab the child and run, but she forced herself to remain calm. Miriam's presence became almost tangible, a cold breeze brushing past Adeobi as if urging her to act wisely. The ritual began with a silence that was almost oppressive, broken only by the faint crackle of the torches that now lined the room. The guests, draped in crimson robes, formed a perfect circle around the altar, their faces solemn but devoid of humanity. Adeobi, still disguised as a cleaner, had carefully positioned herself near the entrance, her nerves frayed as she continued her charade. Chief Obina entered the room with an air of authority that silenced the murmurs of the gathering. He wore an elaborate robe embroidered with gold and black symbols, and his presence was commanding and sinister. "Tonight," he began, his voice resonating with a chilling calmness, "we honor the pact that has granted us dominion over the living. We offer the blood of the innocent to secure our power, wealth, and influence." Two guards entered carrying a small bundle wrapped in white cloth. As they approached the altar, Adeobi's breath caught in her throat. The cloth shifted slightly, and a baby's faint cry echoed through the room. Her hands tightened around the cleaning cart to keep from trembling visibly. Her heart sank as she realized this could be Miriam's baby. Every fiber of her being wanted to rush forward, but the armed guards and the circle of powerful men and women made such a move suicidal. The baby was placed on the altar, and a woman dressed in an elaborate headpiece stepped forward, holding a ceremonial blade. Adeobi clenched her fists, her mind racing. She had captured footage, but could she live with herself if she left without trying to intervene? As the blade was raised high, a sudden gust of cold wind swept through the room, extinguishing some of the torches. The guests gasped, some looking around nervously, while others tried to maintain their composure. The temperature dropped further, and then, she appeared. Miriam's ghost materialized in the corner of the room, her form shimmering with a ghostly light. "Murderers," Miriam's voice echoed, distorted but powerful. Her eyes were filled with anguish and fury as she stepped forward, her spectral figure becoming clearer with every step. The guests froze, some whispering prayers, while others backed away in terror. Chief Obina, however, remained unfazed. Adeobi's chest tightened as she realized this was her moment. While the crowd's attention was focused on Miriam, she slipped closer to the altar. She saw the baby's tiny hands reach upward, and tears welled in her eyes. But before she could act, one of the guards spotted her. "You," he barked, raising his weapon. Miriam turned sharply toward him, her translucent form shifting with unnatural speed. The guard's eyes widened as his body was flung against the wall by an unseen force. The room erupted into chaos, with guests scrambling to flee while others tried to understand what was happening. Taking advantage of the confusion, Adeobi grabbed the baby from the altar. The infant's cries grew louder as she cradled it protectively, her instincts driving her to flee. She sprinted toward the nearest exit, her heart pounding as the commotion behind her grew louder. Miriam's ghost followed, her form creating a barrier between Adeobi and the armed guards who had regained their composure. Chief Obina shouted commands, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Do not let her leave with that child. She must not escape." His tone was a mix of anger and desperation, a crack in his usually stoic demeanor. As Adeobi reached the main hallway, she encountered a man she thought she could trust, one of the hospital's senior doctors who had always been kind to her. Relief washed over her, but only for a moment. "Give me the baby, Adeobi," he said softly, stepping closer. "You don't understand what you've done. This isn't your fight." Adeobi's grip on the baby tightened. "You're part of this," she whispered, her voice filled with betrayal and disbelief. The man's expression darkened. "I'm trying to protect you," he said, reaching for her. But before he could act, Miriam appeared between them, her form glowing brighter than ever. Adeobi didn't wait to see what Miriam would do. She bolted down the hallway, the baby's cries echoing off the walls. The sound of footsteps behind her grew louder as Obina's guards pursued her relentlessly. She ducked into a stairwell, her breath ragged, and began descending as quickly as she could without losing her grip on the baby. The stairwell was dimly lit, and each step felt treacherous. Behind her, the guards' voices grew louder. "She's heading to the lower floors. Don't let her reach the exit." Adeobi's legs burned with effort, but she pushed herself harder, knowing that stopping meant certain death for both her and the child. Miriam's ghost appeared sporadically, causing doors to slam shut and lights to flicker. Her presence slowed the guards, but Adeobi knew it wouldn't be enough to stop them entirely. She reached the ground floor and burst through the door into the hospital's main corridor, searching frantically for an escape route. Adeobi spotted Nkechi waiting outside in a car, the engine running. She sprinted toward the vehicle, her heart racing as the guards burst through the hospital's main entrance behind her. Nkechi threw the passenger door open, shouting, "Get in." Adeobi dove into the car, clutching the baby tightly as Nkechi sped away. The guards fired shots, but the vehicle quickly disappeared into the night. Adeobi sobbed with relief, her body trembling as the adrenaline began to wear off. The baby, now calm, nestled against her chest. Nkechi glanced at her, concern etched on her face. "Are you okay? Is the baby okay?" Adeobi nodded, though her hands still shook. "We have to expose them," she said firmly. "They'll never stop unless the world knows what they've done." Back at Nkechi's office, Adeobi handed over the footage she had captured during the ritual. Nkechi immediately began uploading it to her secure servers, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "This is enough," she said. "With this, we can blow the lid off the entire operation." Dr. Ik joined them, his face pale but determined. "We need to move quickly," he said. "The syndicate will come after us once they realize what we have." He held up a burner phone. "I've contacted a trusted human rights organization. They'll help us disseminate this evidence globally." As the video files uploaded, Adeobi felt a glimmer of hope. For the first time, it seemed like they might actually win this battle. But she knew better than to let her guard down. The syndicate was powerful, and they wouldn't go down without a fight. The footage of the ritual was released within hours. Nkechi had sent it to trusted journalists, international human rights organizations, and whistleblower platforms. The shocking visuals of powerful politicians and elites gathered around an altar, ready to sacrifice an innocent child, spread like wildfire. Social media exploded with outrage, with hashtags like #StopTheSyndicate and #JusticeForInnocence trending globally. While the public reaction was swift and furious, the syndicate wasted no time in retaliation. The hospital administrators, many of whom were implicated in the scandal, began purging evidence and silencing lower-level staff. Reports of mysterious disappearances started surfacing, with whistleblowers vanishing overnight. Adeobi, Nkechi, and Dr. Ik stayed in a safe house provided by the human rights organization. "They'll come for us," Dr. Ik warned, his voice low. "They have resources, connections, and no conscience." Nkechi nodded, her fingers drumming nervously on the table. "We've struck a nerve," she said. "But that means they're more dangerous now than ever." Late that night, the safe house was eerily quiet. Adeobi lay awake, the baby nestled beside her, when the lights began to flicker. A cold draft swept through the room, and she sat up, her instincts on high alert. "Miriam," she whispered. The ghost appeared at the foot of the bed, her ethereal form softer now, almost peaceful. "They are coming for you," Miriam said, her voice a blend of sorrow and determination. "But I will not let them take my child." Adeobi felt a chill run down her spine. "What do we do?" she asked. Before Miriam could answer, the sound of engines roaring outside shattered the silence. Bright headlights illuminated the windows, and the faint sound of heavy boots echoed as armed men approached the house. Miriam turned toward the door, her form glowing brighter. "Stay with the baby," she commanded. "I will deal with them." The door burst open, and the armed men stormed in. But before they could fire a shot, Miriam's ghost unleashed her wrath. The room filled with a blinding light as the men screamed, their weapons clattering to the floor. Shadows danced wildly on the walls as Miriam's fury consumed them, her cries reverberating like thunder. When the chaos subsided, the house was silent once more. The armed men lay unconscious, their faces pale with fear. Miriam stood in the center of the room, her form flickering. Adeobi approached cautiously, tears streaming down her face. "Miriam," she said softly. "Thank you." Miriam turned to her, a faint smile on her ghostly face. "You gave me hope when I had none," she said. "You saved my child." Her form began to fade, the light around her growing dimmer. "It is time for me to rest," she continued. "Protect my baby. Love her as I would have." Adeobi reached out, but Miriam was gone, her presence lingering only as a gentle warmth in the room. The baby stirred, letting out a soft cry, and Adeobi held her close, vowing to keep her safe. The next morning, news broke that Chief Obinna and several high-profile figures had been arrested. The footage had spurred international outrage, forcing authorities to act despite their ties to the syndicate. Protests erupted across the country, demanding justice for the innocent lives lost. Adeobi, Nkechi, and Dr. Ik became unlikely heroes, their names etched into the public consciousness as symbols of courage and resilience. The baby, now named Kizaram, meaning "God answered me," became a beacon of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest times, light could prevail. Though the scars of the ordeal would remain, Adeobi found solace in the child's laughter and in the knowledge that Miriam had finally found peace. As she rocked Kizaram to sleep one evening, she whispered, "You'll grow up knowing your mother was a hero. And I'll make sure you never forget her love." The hospital was shut down, and an investigation into human trafficking and ritual practices swept through the nation. While the syndicate's reach remained vast, their grip had been weakened, and for the first time in years, the victims had a voice. Adeobi looked out the window, the moonlight bathing the room in a soft glow. She felt a quiet resolve settle over her. Miriam's fight had ended, but hers had just begun. She would protect Kizarem, and she would continue to stand against injustice, no matter the cost. The moral lesson of this story teaches that courage and love can overcome even the darkest forces. It teaches that standing up for justice, even when faced with immense danger, is crucial. The story emphasizes the importance of protecting the innocent, exposing corruption, and holding powerful wrongdoers accountable. Additionally, it highlights the enduring power of a mother's love, showing that true love can transcend death and lead to redemption and justice. Thank you, wonderful listeners, for listening to this story. Please do well to like, share, subscribe and leave a comment, for it's your way of supporting me, which helps me to keep sharing more stories. Bye.